Have you ever been insulted in your own home by the very people you sacrificed everything for? That's what happened to me. My son's wife looked me straight in the eye in front of her family and called me the Maid. She thought I'd stay quiet, swallow the shame, and keep serving. But she had no idea this house wasn't theirs. It was mine. So I walked over, handed her the keys, and said just 6 words that changed everything. Good luck paying the mortgage now. And trust me, she wasn't laughing anymore. Before we get started, I want to know, where in the world are you tuning in from? And what time is it right now on your side of the world? Share it in the comments below. I'd love to see. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and be part of our family here at Revenge Unfolded, where every story is about truth, healing, and a little justice too. I spent my life giving love, giving money, giving myself, until one evening, sitting at a table filled with food I bought, I heard something that broke me clean in half. This isn't just about being humiliated. It's about finally waking up. If you've ever felt invisible in your own house, listen close. I remember it so clearly. The clinking of glass, soft jazz humming through the speakers, the smell of roast chicken I'd seasoned at dawn, cooking all day while I ran errands. Everything ready for a dinner I hadn't even been told about. But I was there. Because Grace, my son Daniel's wife, had forgotten to tell me her parents were coming again. The house had to be spotless. Again. I should have known better. I should have seen it coming the moment her mother gave me that look, half polite, half judging, and asked, "And you are?" Grace didn't even hesitate. She laughed, like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Oh, that's Helen, our unofficial maid. Keeps the place running." Everyone laughed, even Daniel. I just stood there, holding the empty wine bottle I'd brought up from the basement. I forced a smile, like the floor hadn't just disappeared under my feet, like my heart wasn't being crushed piece by piece. I excused myself, set the bottle down, walked toward my room while the laughter kept rolling behind me. Not one of them, not even Daniel, said, "That's my mother." Not one word. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the door I'd painted myself when we first moved in. I remembered signing the mortgage papers. My money, my name, my down payment. Daniel had just graduated. Grace wasn't even around yet. They had nothing. I gave them everything. And now, I was the maid. The next morning, I went through the motions. Made coffee, fed the cat Grace pretended to care about, and when she finally came down in her yoga outfit, phone in hand, I waited. She glanced up. "What's this?" she asked when I handed her the keys. Every key. Front door, back door, garage, mailbox. I smiled. "Good luck paying the mortgage now." Her face froze. "What?" I didn't explain. I just walked past her, through the hallway filled with photos I had framed, furniture I had picked, walls I had painted. I didn't pack a thing, just my purse and the same coat I'd worn when I carried Daniel home from the hospital. I didn't say goodbye. Daniel shouted my name as I reached the front door. I heard his bare feet slap against the driveway behind me, but I didn't turn back. I opened the car door, closed it softly. Not a slam, not rage, because something inside me had snapped. But not in anger, not grief either. clarity. And clarity doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It just knows. For the first time in my life, I knew I was done. I didn't know where I was headed, only where I wasn't staying. The last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was Daniel, standing in the driveway, stunned. He didn't even realize what he'd lost. They say you don't know you're drowning until you finally breathe. That first night in the tiny apartment Aunt May had left me years ago wasn't freedom. Not yet. It was silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The place smelled like time itself. Creaky floorboards, yellow wallpaper curling at the edges, a heater wheezing like it might give up any second. I dropped my bag on the kitchen table and just stood there, unsure if I should cry or laugh. I didn't either. I only stared at the chipped tiles, remembering the house I had just walked away from. But that wasn't home anymore. Not for me. The days that followed, I floated like a ghost. Slept on the couch because the bed frame was broken. Ate peanut butter sandwiches, microwave soup. I didn't call anyone. Not because I had no one, but because no one called me. Daniel didn't text, didn't email, not one word. Maybe Grace told him not to, or maybe worse, maybe he just didn't care. I couldn't stop replaying that dinner. The laughter, his laughter. I had raised that boy alone. After his father left, it was me, just me. I gave up everything, career, dreams, even my pride. Worked nights cleaning motel rooms, stocked shelves at dawn, just to keep a roof over his head. And when my parents died and left me their insurance money, I poured it all into a house, a real home. I never asked Daniel for rent, not a dime. But somehow in Grace's version of the story, I was the help. That's when I started writing. Old spiral notebooks, the kind I used to buy Daniel for school. Page after page, not for anyone else, just for me. I wrote what I never said out loud. How I'd wait for a thank you that never came. How I cried in the garage when they went out to dinner without me. How I pretended to be asleep so I wouldn't hear them mocking my TV shows in the living room I paid for. Then, one afternoon, digging for a light bulb in the upstairs closet, I found it. Aunt May's old trunk, heavy, rusted. I forced it open, expecting sewing thread, buttons, maybe fabric. But inside, envelopes. Dozens of them. And one with my name written across the front, in Aunt May's handwriting, nearly 30 years old.
The papers were brittle, yellowed with time. Inside, I found copies of hospital records, scattered notes, and a single photograph of a newborn baby wrapped in a thin hospital blanket. But it wasn't Ethan. The name beneath it read, Michael Harris. I read Aunt May's letter again, and again, 3 times before the truth even began to sink in. She had written about a nurse, Linda, her friend from years ago. Linda had worked at the very hospital where my son was born. She confessed that she had always carried doubts about that night. Something had gone wrong in the nursery, a sudden room change, a last-minute mix-up with the name tags. By the time she raised her suspicions, it was already too late. The babies had gone home with the wrong families. She never told me, said she was scared, said she wanted to believe she was wrong. But years later, Linda stumbled across a document buried deep in her files, a quiet settlement between the hospital and another family. That's when she knew. Ethan wasn't my child. My hands trembled. My breath came shallow. I stared at the photo, at the name written beneath it, Michael Harris. And in that moment, my mind refused to process it. Because if this was true, then who was Ethan? Who was I? To him. But here's the strangest part. I didn't feel rage. I didn't collapse in grief. I felt something else entirely. Freedom. Not because I didn't love Ethan, but because suddenly every wound I carried made sense. The coldness in his eyes, the way I always felt like a stranger in my own family. Maybe it hadn't been in my head. Maybe he had always felt it too. A quiet distance neither of us could name. And for the first time, I wasn't crazy. I spent the entire night combing through every single page of that trunk. Aunt May had saved it all. DNA reports, affidavits, even a tiny newspaper clipping about the Harris family. They weren't strangers. They were here, local, educated, respected, living just a few miles from me all this time. My real son had grown up right here, breathing the same air, walking the same streets. I carefully folded the letters back, slipped them into a fresh envelope, and tucked them into my nightstand. Then I caught my own reflection in the mirror. For a long time, I just stared. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. But for the first time in decades, I wasn't ashamed of her. She was fractured, yes, but she was waking up, and the world had no idea what that meant yet. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was punishing. For weeks, I carried that truth like a live wire inside me, too dangerous to touch, impossible to ignore. I didn't call Ethan, I didn't seek out Michael. I simply existed. Each morning I'd wake, brew a single cup of coffee, and stand at the dusty kitchen window, trying to piece together who I was now. The woman who raised Ethan was gone. That Helen was a caregiver, a wife once, a giver of everything. But this Helen? She didn't know who she was anymore. One cold evening, when the heater broke, I curled on the couch with only candlelight and those hospital files in my lap. I traced every line, every signature, every timestamp. It all matched. It was real. And the grief hit me, not for Ethan, but for Michael, for the birthdays I never planned, for the scraped knees I never kissed, for the science projects and graduations I never witnessed. All those little pieces of motherhood I thought I had, they were meant for someone else. Yet strangely, I didn't hate Ethan. My love for him had never been biological. It had been unconditional, or so I thought. But when someone you raise won't defend you, won't even truly see you, it forces you to re-examine everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally pulled myself up. I wasn't ready to face Ethan yet, not yet, but I could start somewhere. So I walked into town, and across the street I saw it for the first time, the little bookstore at Main and Elm. The green paint, the hand-lettered signs in the window, Harris Books. And there he was, Michael, my son. I didn't need to ask. I just knew. He was maybe 30, 31, clean-cut, wire-rimmed glasses, helping a young woman find a poetry book. His voice was calm, patient, his posture soft but steady, sure of itself. I stood frozen across the street, my heart pounding in my chest as I looked at the child I never got to hold. And I cried. Not with sobs, not loudly, just silent, unrelenting tears that slid down my cheeks and disappeared into my coat. I didn't go in, not that day. Instead, I came back. The next day, and the next, it became a ritual. I'd buy a coffee, sit on the bench across the street, pretend to scroll my phone, and just watch. Watch the life that was supposed to be mine. It wasn't stalking. It was mourning. It was preparation. Because while I sat outside that bookstore, something inside me began to change. I started noticing things. The rhythm of the store, the delivery trucks that came on Wednesdays, the familiar customers. And then my eyes drifted elsewhere, to them, Ethan and Olivia. Yes, I began watching them too, quietly, carefully. Olivia's life was practically a roadmap online. Brunch spots, yoga studios, wine tastings. She posted it all. And slowly I was putting together the pieces. It wasn't hard to follow the trail. And the deeper I looked, the sicker I felt. They weren't struggling like they wanted the world to believe. They were faking it. Olivia's business, her so-called lifestyle coaching brand, was nothing but smoke and mirrors. A rented office for appearances, inflated numbers, followers bought in bulk, credit cards stretched to their limit just to keep the illusion alive. And Ethan? He had quit his job 6 months earlier. Olivia called it manifesting a new chapter. I called it what it really was, reckless delusion. They were stacking cards higher and higher, blind to the storm gathering on the horizon. I didn't tell anyone what I had uncovered. Not yet. Instead, I began keeping a second journal. Not like the first, where I bled my grief and heartbreak onto paper. No, this one was sharp, calculated. Dates, names, business filings, public records, evidence. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was preparing. They thought I had disappeared, faded into irrelevance, but I hadn't. I was more present than I had ever been, and soon I would remind them exactly who I was. The first time I saw Michael up close, I couldn't even breathe. It was a rainy Thursday. The bookstore was nearly empty, and he was quietly restocking the biography section, humming under his breath. I lingered outside too long, and when he turned, his eyes found mine through the window. He smiled, just a polite, gentle smile, the kind you'd give any stranger, because that's what I was to him, a stranger. My chest tightened. My hands trembled too hard to even pretend I was checking my phone. I turned quickly, walking fast, ducking around the corner until I reached my car. That's where the tears came. Tell me, how do you look a grown man in the eye and say, your whole life was built on a mistake and mine was shattered because of it? At home, I pulled out Ruth's letter again. I must have read it 100 times by then. She hadn't just stumbled across the truth. She had investigated it. The name Michael Jameson wasn't a theory. It was confirmed. She had the settlement papers. The hospital never told me, because I was never meant to know. And the Jamesons? They must have known something. Maybe not the full truth, but enough to quietly accept a payout and move on. But I wasn't there for revenge against them. I didn't even know what I was there for. All I knew was that I wanted to know him, to see if the ache in my chest could finally be filled by the reality of who he was. So I went back. At first, it was small. I bought a book. Michael rang it up himself. "Good choice," he said warmly. "Hard to find these days." His voice was steady, kind, and it felt achingly familiar. When he handed me the bag, his fingers brushed against mine, just for a second. I swallowed hard. "You own this place?" "Sort of," he chuckled. "My parents helped me get started. They're retired now, so I keep busy here." Of course. Of course he had support. He had parents who built him a foundation, not like Ethan, who only had me. My sweat, my sacrifice. And he turned around and offered me up as a joke. Michael had parents, but not me. And Ethan had me, but never wanted what I gave. The universe had scrambled us all, leaving pieces that never fit, cutting us open as we tried to force them into place. I started visiting the bookstore every few days. Sometimes I bought a novel. Sometimes I just wandered the aisles. Michael began to recognize me. He'd greet me with a smile, back again, as if I belonged there. We made small talk. Weather, local news, books, ordinary things. But I never told him my name. Not yet. It wasn't time. Meanwhile, in the shadows of my old life, things were starting to fracture. Ethan sent me one text. Just one. "Mom, are you okay?" That was it, after weeks of silence. I didn't reply. I had nothing left to give him. But I kept digging. I pulled up the deed to the house. It was still in my name. Olivia had tried to refinance, denied. She couldn't afford it. Ethan had no income. I could have pulled the rug out from under them right then, evicted them with one signature, but that would have been too merciful. No, They needed to feel the slow unraveling, the fear, the sickening realization that the ground beneath them didn't just crack. It belonged to someone else entirely. Me. Every night I wrote. My new journal became a map. Receipts, conversations, every detail Michael shared about his life, hobbies, favorite authors, memories. I captured it all, not to use against him, but to understand the son I never got to raise. And in between those pages, the truth sharpened. Ethan didn't treat me with cruelty because of the switch. He treated me that way because he chose to, because Olivia encouraged it, because somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as disposable. But Michael didn't even know me, and yet in 5 minutes, he had shown me more kindness than Ethan had in 5 years. I wasn't ready to tell him, not yet, but I was close. When the time came, I wouldn't just tell him who I was. I would tell him everything. The hospital, the switch, the life stolen from us both. But first, I had to finish watching the collapse of the life I had already left behind. Because once the last piece crumbled, there would be no looking back. I never planned to become a shadow in my own story. But sometimes, the only way to see people clearly is to step out of the light. After that day in the bookstore, something shifted in me. Not suddenly, more like a sunrise inching across a frozen field. Slow, quiet, inescapable. I began walking taller, speaking firmer. I bought a secondhand laptop and started typing my notes into files. Organized, cross-referenced, evidence. This wasn't a diary anymore. It was a strategy, a survival plan. And one thing became undeniable. Ethan and Olivia's world was nothing but duct tape and lies. The house they lived in, still mine. Olivia's brand, Olivia Ascends, a hollow empire. Fake clients, fake success. A luxury car she couldn't afford, all for the illusion of abundance. I pulled her LLC papers, checked the tax records, scanned reviews. Every polished post online was carefully curated, designed to mask the emptiness underneath. And I knew then I wouldn't need to lift a finger to destroy them. All I had to do was wait, because lies always collapse under their own weight. Every event they attended was staged, a photo op, a carefully curated illusion of success. But behind those smiles and champagne glasses was nothing but debt. Maxed out credit cards, a defaulted private loan, Ethan's old student debt still rotting in collections. They were suffocating under a mountain of bills, too proud to admit it, or maybe too arrogant. That's when I realized something chilling. If I pulled just one string, their whole world would collapse. But I didn't. Not yet. Because there was one more step I needed to take first. Michael. I still visited the bookstore. He still didn't know who I really was. But each interaction chipped away at the fear that had chained me for years. We talked about books, about life, about little things, TV shows, coffee, the city noise outside. Once we sat in the tiny cafe next door. He told me how he almost became a teacher, but his love for books kept pulling him back to business. "You remind me of someone," he said, sipping his tea. "Someone I can't place." I smiled. "Maybe a librarian." He laughed. "Maybe." That laugh stayed with me for days, because I didn't just like him, I recognized him. Not just from the file I'd read or the photo Margaret had left me, but in the way he carried himself, the way he listened, the quiet strength in his presence. It felt like mine. I began dreaming of a life I never had, raising him myself, baking cookies together in the kitchen, cheering at his soccer games from the sidelines. I could see it so vividly, it made my chest ache. But I couldn't rewrite the past, So I focused on what came next. The first thing I did was call a lawyer, not for revenge, for justice. The house, my house. I'd made the down payment. I paid every bill. I never signed it over. Ethan had always said, "We'll put it in your name later. No rush." Of course, there was no rush for him. I was the one footing every expense. Now I wanted my name back, my rights, my home. If not physically, then legally. I met with an attorney downtown, a woman about my age, sharp, steady, no nonsense. She listened without judgment. When I finished telling her everything, she nodded and said, "We'll file the motion this week." I signed the papers with a steady hand. That evening, I walked past the house. The porch light was glowing. Olivia sat on the swing with a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone. Inside, Ethan was on the couch, controller in hand, lost in another game. They were living life on autopilot, no clue the ground beneath them was already shifting. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about balance. When the house sold, they would finally feel what I had lived with for years: powerlessness. And maybe, just maybe, they'd understand what it felt like to be discarded. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream. I just watched, waited, and walked away. The first domino had fallen, and none of them even knew it yet. I've always believed silence is stronger than noise, that true strength isn't in how loud you fight, but in how deeply you know you're right. The day the notice went out, I sat at a cafe near the courthouse, stirring honey into my tea. For the first time in years, I felt calm. My lawyer said they'd get the papers at 9 a.m. sharp. At 9:15, my phone buzzed. Ethan. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing, then flipped the phone over and let the silence speak for me. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear his voice, I just wasn't ready to hear him lie. Later that day, I saw his email, just one short message. "Mom, what are you doing? Please call me. Olivia is freaking out." Of course she was. The mortgage was due and refinancing was off the table. The woman they thought was too weak to matter was the one holding the deed, and they never saw it coming. A week later, another call. Olivia this time. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice tight, cracking under the weight of control she was desperate to keep. "Margaret, we really need to talk. This is all it's a misunderstanding. Even says you're going through something and we're here to support you, but you're putting our lives at risk, and that's not fair." I listened twice. She called the house hers, and my silence sharpened into something deliberate. They didn't understand yet, but they would. 2 days later, Ethan came to my apartment. I saw him through the peephole before he even knocked, his hair uncalmed, dark circles under his eyes. A man unraveling. I didn't open the door. He knocked, called my name. "Mom, please don't do this." I stood there, hand on the knob, but I didn't turn it. I let him feel the weight of being unheard, just as I had for years. The following week, the papers were finalized. The house was listed. Every cent of profit, legally, ethically, emotionally, belonged to me. Olivia tried to fight it, claiming she'd contributed value. My lawyer smiled. Let her prove it in court. She couldn't, because her only investment was in appearances. And now those appearances were cracking, one filter at a time. Word spread. Olivia's parents stopped commenting on her posts. Clients quietly backed out. She even made a video ranting about the unfairness of generational property laws. But people saw through her. And me? I didn't post a thing. I just kept going back to Michael's bookstore. We had coffee again, talked about an old novel we both loved. He recommended a memoir. It's about grief, he said, but also forgiveness. I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. He added, I think you'd like it. Maybe I would, but not yet, because I wasn't then grieving or forgiving. That night, I boxed up old photos, Ethan as a baby, his school portraits, birthday parties where I'd done all the work and got none of the credit. I didn't throw them away, but I put them away because the woman who spent her life giving everything was gone. And the woman who replaced her, she wasn't angry. She was awake. The papers were signed.
The house was officially going on the market. And across town, in that little green bookstore, my real son Michael was laughing at something a customer said, completely unaware that his life was about to change too. Not in ruin, but in the best way. Because not every loss is a tragedy. Sometimes it's the doorway to something new. I used to think masks belonged at costume parties, but Claire wore hers like a second skin. Flawless, smiling, unshakable. The kind of woman who knew how to angle her face just right in every photo, how to pitch her voice to win every crowd. But masks always crack. And I was about to break hers wide open. The idea came one quiet morning as I skimmed the local business directory. By then, I'd already gathered enough whispers. Her mounting credit issues, the fake Instagram deals, the mortgage payments slipping through the cracks. But whispers weren't enough. I didn't want gossip. I wanted facts. Something solid, something they couldn't spin. So, I hired a consultant, a discreet man named Darren. Calm, professional, invisible when he needed to be. I told him I needed an audit, completely legal, just private. And I handed him Claire's company name, Claire Ascends, LLC. A week later, he placed a neat folder in my hands, and even I wasn't ready for what it held. Her entire empire was smoke and mirrors. No tax filings for 2 quarters. Forged invoices for clients who didn't exist. Photo shoots staged at rental properties passed off as home makeovers. Her glossy brand deals? Nothing but affiliate links padded with fake numbers. Claire wasn't just faking success. She was conning everyone. Would this stand up under scrutiny? I asked Darren. He looked me straight in the eye. If this goes public, she's finished. Financially, professionally, completely. That was all I needed. I printed everything, then found the address of Claire's parents. The same people who once sipped wine in my kitchen, laughing, while their daughter humiliated me in my own home. I mailed the file anonymously. No signature, no explanation, just a single note clipped to the top. Everything you think you know is a performance. 2 days later, the cracks began to show. Claire's Instagram went quiet. No morning routines, no coffee cup selfies. The latest inspirational post was instantly swarmed with strange comments like vultures circling a carcass. Then her website disappeared, under maintenance. Her next workshop canceled. And the cherry on top? A friend called to tell me she'd seen Claire's mother storming out of the house, screaming on her phone, her purse swinging like a weapon. Behind those walls, there was no filter, no script, only the truth. That night, Ethan called. Again. I didn't answer. His voicemail shook through the speaker. Mom, I don't know what's happening. Claire's parents, they're furious. Someone sent them documents, real documents. Did you do this? I stayed silent. Finally, he was seeing her for who she really was, and himself too. He had spent years defending a woman who destroyed everything in her path, starting with me. Let him sit in that fire. Later, I wandered to the bookstore.
Michael was closing up. He waved when he saw me. Back again, he grinned, unlocking the door. At this point, you should just work here. Maybe I should, I said. We sat among stacks of new paperbacks, helping each other catalog. No questions, no performance, just silence. Why do you come here? He asked softly. It caught me off guard. Really? And then I noticed he had my eyes. I like the way it feels, I whispered, like nothing here pretends to be something it's not. He tilted his head. Me too. The quiet stretched between us. Not truth, not yet, but something close. A thread. A fragile connection. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost haunting someone else's life. I felt seen. And the invisible woman who once stood small in her own kitchen, she was gone. In her place stood someone they never expected, someone they never should have underestimated. I used to think heartbreak was sudden, like a crash or a slammed door. But no, it seeps in slowly, like water dripping through a roof until one day the whole ceiling caves in. And now Ethan, my son, was standing right beneath the flood. The truth reached him fast. The house was listed, Claire's mask was shattered, her empire crumbling, and with nowhere left to turn, Ethan did the only thing he'd ever known. He came knocking on my door. I was finishing a cup of tea when I heard it. 3 soft raps. Hesitant. The knock of someone who wasn't sure if they'd be welcomed or turned away. I opened the door slowly. He looked hollow, unshaven, clothes rumpled, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in days. "Mom, can I come in?" he rasped. I didn't speak, just stepped aside. He stood there in the middle of my apartment, stiff, lost. For a long time, neither of us said a word. Until finally, he broke. "Why are you doing this?" His voice cracked. "Why are you doing this to us? Us. As if there had been an us in years." I sat down calmly, my voice steady. "I'm not doing anything to you, Ethan. I'm doing something for me." His jaw tightened. "You're selling the house. My house. The place I grew up. And you just gave it away." I leaned forward, my voice low but unshakable. "You let your wife turn me into your maid, and you watched it happen."
"You laughed," I said, my voice low but cutting, "and you never even apologized." Ethan didn't deny it. He just stared at the floor, his shoulders hunched like the weight of years had finally landed. "I thought you were just being dramatic," he muttered. "I didn't realize it hurt you that deeply." I shook my head slowly. "That's the problem, Ethan. You never cared to realize. You never asked what broke me. You just assumed I'd keep cleaning up your messes, paying your bills, smiling politely while your wife chipped away at every piece of who I was." He flinched at the words. "Olivia's not who I thought she was." A bitter laugh escaped me. "That's not news to me." For the first time, he looked at me, really looked. His eyes were glassy, his voice cracked. "I lost everything." I didn't blink. "No, Ethan, you didn't lose it. You gave it away." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "I miss you," he whispered. I straightened in my chair. "I raised you. I fed you. I clothed you. I sacrificed my life so you could build yours. And you stood by while I was humiliated in the very house I bought with my hands." His lip trembled. "I thought she was helping me. I thought we were building something real.
You built a lie, I said sharply, and now you're standing in the rubble. Ethan pushed himself up, pacing the room like a trapped animal. So that's it? You're just going to walk away? I rose too, my steps deliberate, moving toward the drawer in the kitchen. My hand hovered before pulling out the envelope Ruth had left me. Its weight was heavier than paper had any right to be. I'm going to tell you something, I said, gripping it tightly, and I need you to actually listen this time. Not half listen, not nod along. Really listen. Confusion flickered across his face, but he nodded. I handed him the envelope. These are your birth records. Read them. He sank back into the chair, tearing it open with shaky fingers. His brows furrowed, his eyes darting across hospital files, Ruth's handwritten letter, and the DNA test she had carried in silence for decades. Then his face fell, like the ground had opened beneath him. This can't be real. It is, I said softly. You're telling me I'm not your son? I met his eyes without flinching. I'm telling you that you weren't born to me, but I raised you as if you were my own. I gave you everything, every breath, every moment, even when you didn't want it. His skin went pale. Then who's your real son? I didn't answer. He sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, the pages trembling in his hands. I don't even know who I am anymore, he whispered, and for the first time, I let the truth cut through me like a mirror. Now you know how I felt. Years of restraint, years of silence, it all cracked inside him. And I saw it. Not anger, not defiance, but something breaking. And instead of satisfaction, I felt only peace, because I had finally spoken what should have been spoken long ago. I walked him to the door. His eyes, wide and pleading, searched mine. Can we fix this? I held his gaze steady. I don't know, but it's not my job to try anymore. And with that, I closed the door. Not slammed, not shoved, just closed. Gently, but finally. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one holding it open. It took me 3 long days to decide what came next. I practiced in front of the mirror, in my car, even in the grocery store, whispering lines to myself while gripping a basket of oranges. I'm your mother. There was a mistake. You've been living a life that wasn't meant to be yours, and so have I. But no matter how I rehearsed, it never sounded right. How do you drop that truth into someone's life and expect them to survive it? Still, I knew I had to try. Michael was in the bookstore, as always. The afternoon light fell through the tall windows, soft and golden, scattering across shelves and hardwood floors. The place felt sacred, like a sanctuary built for truth. When he looked up and smiled, I almost turned around. Almost. Hey, he said warmly. Perfect timing. We just got a new shipment of rare poetry editions. I swallowed hard. Actually, I came to talk. He studied me for a second, catching the weight in my voice. All right, come on, let's go in the back. He led me through a side door into a small break room. A chipped table, a mismatched couch, a kettle humming softly on the counter. A room stripped of pretense. We sat down. I've been coming here for a reason, I admitted, wringing my hands. I figured, he said gently. You did? He gave a faint smile. You're not exactly here for the books. I let out a nervous laugh. No, I'm not. Slowly, I pulled out Ruth's envelope, the records,
The letter. The proof. I placed it on the table between us. He frowned. What's this? Something that will change everything. He leaned back cautiously. 30-some years ago, I began, my voice shaking. There was a mistake at the hospital. 2 babies were switched at birth. His brows drew together, confusion spreading across his face. My son, I whispered, was given to another family. And theirs was given to me. The air in the room thickened. He went utterly still. I raised him, I continued, tears welling. I gave him everything, but he never really loved me back. His eyes searched mine, connecting the unspoken truth. You think I know you are. He reached for the envelope with trembling hands, opened it, read every word, every test result, Ruth's curious confession. The silence between us stretched forever. Finally, he set the papers down, his fingertips still resting on them like he couldn't let go. This is a lot, he said quietly. I know. And you're Margaret. Yes. He looked up at me, eyes glassy, lost. I don't feel anything. Not yet. You don't have to, I whispered. I'm not here to ask for a place in your life. I just needed you to know. He nodded slowly. Why now? Because silence has been killing me. And the truth deserves to breathe. Michael stood up after a while, pacing. I don't know what to do with this. I don't either, I admitted. But I don't hate you. Tears blurred my vision. He turned towards me. You didn't have to come, but you did. I didn't know how not to, I whispered.
He nodded again, and this quiet understanding settled between us like a fragile truce. Can we take it slow? He asked finally. His voice was almost childlike. I don't want to make this something it's not. I exhaled softly. I wouldn't ask for anything else. He gave me a faint, fragile smile, like someone testing whether hope could still exist. You want to stay for tea? He asked. And for the first time in years, I smiled back without hesitation. I'd love to. That afternoon, we didn't talk about the files. We didn't talk about lies or broken trust. Instead, we talked about books stacked on dusty shelves, about the weather, about how he despised the sound of wind chimes, but loved the rhythm of rain on glass. It wasn't joy. It wasn't closure. But it was something new. Not a relationship, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, a beginning. By the time autumn rolled around, it wasn't just the leaves that were changing. The house sold faster than I ever expected, at full asking price, more than I dared imagine. That meant Ethan and Olivia had only 30 days to pack up their lives. No extensions, no negotiations. I hadn't evicted them out of rage. I did it out of necessity. That house had been my prison for too long. And as I watched them pack their carefully curated life into cardboard boxes, it felt like watching a theater set being dismantled piece by piece. The play was over, the illusion gone. The day the moving truck came, I didn't stop. I just drove by slowly, watching from a distance. Olivia barked sharp orders at the movers, her oversized sunglasses hiding the last scraps of pride. Ethan stood on the lawn, pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. I wondered if he ever thought this day would come, if he ever imagined I would be the one to bring it. Their fall wasn't dramatic. No screaming matches, no scandals in the papers, but it was absolute. Olivia's parents cut off their financial support. Her brand collapsed. Every major sponsor gone. The woman who once laughed in my own kitchen couldn't even afford her overpriced skincare or her daily matcha. And Ethan, he tried. He really did. But with no degree, no references, and no experience, the job market slammed doors in his face. Eventually, he moved into a small, worn-down apartment on the edge of town. I didn't ask for these updates. I heard them from the lawyer, and I didn't celebrate, because this was never about revenge. It was about truth, about consequences finally catching up. Meanwhile, my own life, quietly, steadily, was becoming something new. Michael and I kept meeting. Casual things, coffee, conversations about articles, long talks about books. Once, he asked about my writing, and I admitted I had started working on a memoir. "I think I have a story to tell," I said, "even if no one ever reads it." "You should," he replied softly. "Stories like that, they matter." He still didn't call me mom. I didn't expect him to. That wasn't the point. What we were building wasn't out of obligation, but out of choice. And that made all the difference. One afternoon, we wandered the farmer's market together. He picked up a jar of apple butter and laughed. He said, "My mom used to make this every fall." And for the first time, hearing my mom didn't sting. It felt okay, natural, because he already had a mother. And I had a son who never saw me until it was too late. Some nights, I sat with a cup of tea and wondered if Ethan was sleeping on a mattress or just the floor. If Olivia still wrapped herself in silk robes, if they looked at each other now and finally saw what they ignored for years. But I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of what we were supposed to be. Grief, I learned, is like a shadow. It fades slowly. But pride, self-respect, that grows stronger, especially when you finally love yourself more than you ever loved someone else's approval. Before the house sale closed, I walked through my old neighborhood one last time, not to haunt the past, but to let it go. I passed the school Ethan once attended, the park where I pushed him on the swings, the grocery store where I counted coupons just to afford his favorite cereal. And then I released it all, because I had given everything to a family that never gave back. Now I was giving to someone who might never call me mom, but who still looked at me with kindness, with curiosity, with respect. Sometimes you don't need redemption, you just need peace. And for the first time in my life, I was beginning to feel it. It was early November when my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Just one line. "Can we meet?" Just once. I stared at it for a long time. Weeks had passed since I'd last seen him. Weeks of silence heavier than any argument we could have had. But the tone in that message, it wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It felt like surrender. We met at a small park on the edge of town. Rusted benches, a dried-up pond. I chose it because it carried no memories, no ghosts. He was already there, sitting hunched forward, hands clasped between his knees. For a moment, he looked like the boy he used to be. Awkward, unsure, waiting for direction. I sat beside him, not too close, not too far. He cleared his throat. He said, "I'm not here to ask for anything." I just nodded. I wanted to understand. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope. The same one. Ruth's letter, the documents, the DNA results. "Again," I whispered, handing it over. He didn't even open it. Just held it on his lap like it was already etched into his skin. He said, "I did a test of my own." "Same result?" I just nodded again. He said, "I spent weeks wondering, if I wasn't your son, then what was I?" His voice cracked. I looked at him then, really looked, and said softly, "You were my child, but I treated you the way I know you treated me." He winced. He said, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it.
I said, "You don't. But that doesn't mean I hate you." His eyes glistened. "Then what does it mean?" I said, "It means I finally love myself more than I love the idea of you." The silence that followed was heavy, unshakable. He bowed his head. I thought I was protecting Olivia, standing by her. But I was just hiding behind her, wasn't I? You let her rewrite the story, and you handed her the pen. He shook his head slowly. "I wish I could undo it." I said, "You can't." We sat like that for a long while. Two people who had shared a life built on a lie, unraveling it together in the cold November air. He broke the silence with words I never expected. "I hope he's good to you." I blinked, startled. "Michael?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Your son." A breath caught in my chest. "He's kind," I whispered. "Gentle." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "I suppose some of that came from you then." We both let out a laugh, tired, fragile, not bitter, not joyful, just real. Then he said something that lingered in the air. "I don't want to be in your life if it hurts you, but if there's ever a place for me, just a corner of it." His voice trailed off. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I rose to my feet and gazed out over the pond. Leaves floated across the surface like ashes, carried gently by the wind. "I'll think about it," I murmured. He nodded once. "That's more than I hoped for." Before I walked away, I placed my hand on his shoulder for just a second, one human moment that felt both final and forgiving. And that was it. Not closure, but understanding. And maybe that was enough, because I didn't need to fix him anymore. I didn't need to be fixed either. I just needed to be free. And for the first time in my life, I was. Freedom. I always thought that word was too big for me, something reserved for flags and parades, not for an ordinary woman who had spent decades disappearing in the shadows of others. But the morning I turned the key to my son Michael's bookstore, I finally understood what freedom truly meant. He had called me the night before. His voice was calm, almost casual, but I could hear the weight beneath it. Something waiting. When I arrived, he stood by the back wall. Above him, a new wooden sign had been hung over an arched doorway. The words carved into it read, "The Next Chapter." I smiled. "What's this?" Michael stepped forward and placed a small brass key in my hand. Simple, polished. "It's a new section I'm opening. A cozy reading space, coffee corner, community talks. I wanted it to feel like more than just a store. I wanted it to feel like belonging." I turned the key over slowly, my hand trembling. "And you want me to open it?" His eyes held mine, serious, steady. "You gave someone your whole life. They treated you like background, like furniture. But I see you. You don't have to prove anything to me. You've already done enough." Tears blurred my vision. I tried to blink them back. "You don't have to do this," I whispered. "I know," he said softly, "but I want to." I stepped toward the doorway, sliding the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as though it had been waiting for me all along. Inside, warm light streamed through tall windows. Shelves lined the walls, already half stocked with memoirs and classics. In the center sat a thick rug, a worn armchair, a small table with a porcelain tea set. It felt like a room from a dream I didn't even know I had. I turned, my heart unraveling. "Michael," he smiled, "consider it yours, for as long as you want it." I stood in the center of the room, breathing it in, the scent of new wood, of paper, of possibility. That night, back in the apartment, for the last time, I opened my old notebook. The final page was still blank, and on it I wrote, "I was a woman who gave until I disappeared. Then I became the woman who took it all back. Not with rage, not with fire, but with silence, with truth, and with a strength they never saw coming." The very next day, I finalized the donation. Part of the money from the house sale went to a foundation for women starting over, women who had been dismissed, discarded, underestimated, just like I was. They called to thank me, but I didn't need thanks, because every time I stepped into that bookstore, into the next chapter, I remembered who I was. Not Ethan's mother, not Olivia's maid, Margaret Walker, woman, survivor, author of her own ending. I never needed permission to start again, just a key. And this time, it didn't open someone else's door, it opened mine. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe and share your own story in the comments, because your voice matters more than you think.